Hello, my fellow weirdlings, it's Margot, and today I'm talking about a gruesome real-life event that may have been an inspiration for the movie Jaws, so keep watching. The summer of 1916 was a brutally hot one on the east coast of the U.S. People were naturally drawn to beaches, and many flocked to the Jersey Shore for that 4th of July holiday. Unfortunately, so did one rogue shark that went on a short-lived but unprecedented reign of terror that attracted vengeful mobs and captured national attention, leaving 5 unfortunate victims in its wake. This incident forever changed the American public's and the scientific community's perception of sharks. Here's what we know. The summer of 1916 saw a particularly high number of beachgoers, not just because of the sweltering heat, but because of the polio epidemic sweeping through New York City, an affliction that was believed to be improved by fresh sea air. People were seeking sanctuary from the heat, the dangers of an epidemic, and the stress of the First World War raging in Europe. Ocean swimming was still a fairly new but trendy pastime. One of the Jersey Shore's popular beach resort towns was Beach Haven, New Jersey, and one of Beach Haven's holiday visitors was Charles Vansant. Charles was the 25-year-old son of a Philadelphia doctor who decided to spend the 4th of July in Beach Haven to escape the oppressive heat of the city. He was staying at Ingleside, a luxurious beachfront hotel. On the evening of July 1st, Charles went for a pre-dinner swim in the Atlantic Ocean, yards away from his hotel room, with his Chesapeake Bay Retriever dog at his side. Charles was at the hotel with his father and sister, who sadly bore witness to what was to come. Charles was athletic and a strong swimmer. He wasn't far from the shore, in water only 3.5 feet deep, with a lifeguard on duty, but suddenly a dark fin approached him, cutting through the water. Something suddenly clamped onto Charles's left leg and refused to let go. Charles began to scream as the water around him turned red with blood. At first, other beachgoers assumed he was calling to his dog. When they realized he was in distress, they formed a human chain and tried to pull him to safety. The fearsome creature wouldn't unclench its jaws until its belly scraped across the pebbles of the shallow waters near the shore. Charles, badly injured, was carried back to the lobby of his hotel, where he bled to death just before 7:00 p.m. The attending physician was fairly shocked by the cause of death, a shark bite. Shark attacks along the coast of New Jersey were unheard of in the early 1900s. This was actually the first recorded shark attack fatality in the U.S. At that time, many scientists believed sharks to be shy, posing no threat to swimmers, even positing that a shark wouldn't be powerful enough to maul a human. Old mariners' tales about shark attacks were never taken seriously. In 1891, millionaire businessman Herman Ulrichs had even offered $500, which would be worth nearly $13,000 today, to anyone who could prove that sharks were a danger to humans. Unfortunately, Ulrichs died 10 years before the New Jersey shark attacks. After the attack on Charles Vansant, a Philadelphia Public Ledger headline declared, "Bathers need have no fear of sharks," chalking Charles's death up to a freak accident, with experts hypothesizing that the shark had actually been trying to attack Charles's dog. But 5 days later, that theory was pretty much disproven. In Spring Lake, New Jersey, another resort town about 45 miles north of Beach Haven, a 27-year-old Swiss bellboy for the local Essex and Sussex hotel named Charles Bruder was taking his regular lunchtime swim. He was about 130 yards from shore beyond the breakers when a shark bit off his left leg above the knee and his right leg just below the knee. A group of men rowed a boat out to try to rescue him, rowing toward the blood that was quickly pooling around him. On the shore, women fainted as lifeguards pulled the severely maimed young man onto the beach. One witness described the attack as being like when an airplane attacks a zeppelin. Nothing could be done to save him. By the time he reached the shore, Charles was already dead. An assistant curator at New York's American Museum of Natural History examined Charles Bruder's body and pronounced the injuries to be the work of a killer whale. Others were sure the attack came from a giant tuna or a great sea turtle. Then there were the conspiracy theorists who were sure the attack had been perpetrated by a shark. But that's not really much of a conspiracy, so they took it a step further and insisted this particular shark was trained by the Germans to follow their U-boats and strike American swimmers. The beaches along the Jersey Shore stayed open, despite 2 fatal attacks and reports from sea captains of sightings of large sharks just off the coast. People still refused to believe that sharks could pose any real danger to humans. However, after this second attack, protective nets were installed at beaches along the Jersey Shore, and armed men in boats patrolled the ocean waters. This may have actually been somewhat helpful, if the sharks had stayed in the ocean. The next attack occurred the next week, on July 12th, just 25 miles north of Spring Lake, in Matawan, New Jersey. It was 96 degrees Fahrenheit. 10-year-old Lester Stillwell and his friends were playing at Matawan Creek, a popular swimming hole, trying to cool down. Lester worked at the basket weaving factory, and a sympathetic foreman had given the employees the afternoon off, due to the excessive heat. Matawan Creek was a small placid body of brackish water, more than a mile inland from where it emptied into Raritan Bay. As Lester floated on his back, a shadow suddenly appeared beneath the water. A shark grabbed him by the abdomen and pulled him under. He surfaced just briefly enough to let out a horrific scream, before the shark once again pulled him under, according to witnesses, shaking him like a dog with a rat. Then he was gone. Lester's terrified friends, in various stages of undress from skinny dipping, ran down the town's main street screaming for help. Some met them with disbelief, thinking it was a prank. Others thought Lester may have had a seizure, considering he was an epileptic. Townspeople rushed to Lester's aid. One of them was a 24-year-old local tailor named Stanley Fisher, who went by Stanley. From a rowboat, Stanley probed the murky waters with a pole, finding no signs of life. Eventually, it became clear that young Lester wasn't going to be found alive. But Stanley was determined to return Lester's body to his distraught parents, waiting on the banks. He jumped into the water. Finally, Stanley spotted Lester's body beneath the water. He dove deeper into the creek to retrieve the boy, though he knew there was potentially a killer shark waiting for him. And there was. As Stanley grabbed Lester's lifeless body, the shark reappeared, still feeding on the child. Stanley managed to free Lester's remains from the shark, but it then latched onto Stanley's right leg. Witnesses reported seeing a dark shape slam into Stanley's right side, then drag him under the water. Stanley pummeled the shark with his fists as men in a rowboat hit it with oars, until it finally swam away. Stanley's neighbors dragged him to shore and desperately attempted to bandage the wound. The leg was ripped open from hip to knee. Stanley died from massive blood loss hours later, on a train while being transported to the closest hospital, 31 miles away. 30 minutes after the attack on Stanley, presumably on its way back out to sea, a shark bit the leg of 12-year-old Joseph Dunn near the mouth of Matawan Creek. Joseph was bitten while climbing a dock ladder to get out of the water, as he was being warned about the shark. He was rushed to the nearest hospital in critical condition, but Joseph managed to survive, and was finally allowed to go home about 2 months later. He was the sole survivor of the 1916 Jersey Shore shark attacks. At this point, with 4 dead and 1 injured, over the course of 12 days, it was finally decided that this shark was a danger to the public, and that these attacks needed to be taken seriously. The shark quickly became public enemy number 1, with bounty notices offering a $100 reward, which would be worth about $2,350 today, to the person or persons killing the shark believed to be in Matawan Creek. Hysteria was sparked and angry mobs were formed, arriving at the creek with spears, pitchforks, harpoons, shotguns, and dynamite, firing at any movement they saw in the creek's muddy waters, and using sheep for shark bait. How surreal must it be to find yourself in an angry mob actually wielding a pitchfork? 2 days after Lester Stillwell's death, all of the commotion floated his body to the top of the water, and his family was finally able to lay him to rest. The situation in Matawan got so much attention that President Woodrow Wilson was flooded with telegrams and letters from panicked Americans insisting the federal government do something to stop the man-eating shark. 2 days after the Matawan Creek attacks, President Wilson summoned a cabinet meeting at the White House to discuss, quote, the shark horror gripping the New Jersey coast. The U.S. Treasury Secretary was tasked with leading a war on sharks that included assistance from the U.S. Coast Guard and the Bureau of Fisheries to, quote, rout the sea terrors. A July 14th article in the Philadelphia Inquirer reported that the president would provide federal aid to, quote, drive away all the ferocious man-eating sharks which have been making prey of bathers. You know, I've mentioned this before, but Woodrow Wilson was a real piece of work. That same morning, in a small motorboat just off the coast of South Amboy, New Jersey, New York shark hunter, taxidermist, and lion tamer for Barnum and Bailey Circus, Michael Schleicher, caught a shark in a dragnet he'd cast in Raritan Bay. He struck the shark repeatedly on the head with a broken oar handle until it no longer moved. According to the book 12 Days of Terror, this was the largest-scale animal hunt in history. The shark that Michael Schleicher caught was a 350-pound, 7.5-foot juvenile great white. Back on land, Schleicher gutted the shark and found about 15 pounds of human remains inside its stomach, including a shin bone and a rib. These bones were never conclusively identified. Whether or not this particular shark was the hunted man-eater has never been proven, but there were no further attacks in New Jersey after its death. The shark was put on display in a shop in New York, where it's said to have brought in a lot of tourist money. Ichthyologist George Burgess has stated the 1916 Jersey Shore attacks were the most unique set of shark attacks that ever have occurred. But, as with pretty much anything that makes the news, the capture of the man-eating shark wasn't without some controversy. Some experts believe the shark behind the Jersey Shore attacks wasn't actually a great white shark, but rather a bull shark. Bull sharks are much more likely to venture into freshwater rivers and creeks. They have a unique ability to function normally in salt, fresh, and brackish water. Great whites normally stay in the ocean. However, the Matawan Creek attacks took place during a full moon, when the tide was higher and the salt water content of the creek was also higher than normal, possibly high enough to sustain a great white shark for several days. But some people have even theorized that the ocean attacks were the work of a great white, while the creek attacks were done by a bull shark. Also, a museum expert who studied the bones believed they may have come from a body that had been dead for a while, thinking perhaps the shark may have fed on a previously deceased body, possibly of a drowning victim. Another theory is that Michael Schleicher may have planted the bones for the reward money and attention. But it also can't be ruled out that there really could have been more than one man-eating shark at the Jersey Shore, including Schleicher's. With no further attacks, most considered the matter settled, and life pretty much went back to normal. However, after the Jersey Shore shark attacks, the relationship between Americans and sharks was forever changed. Sharks were suddenly man-eating predators, monsters to be feared. The New York Times reported that even the most skeptical scientists no longer doubted that big fish attack men. And that brings us to the most famous man-eating shark of all, and the movie that did more to instill a fear of sharks into the American psyche than all real-life shark attacks combined, Jaws. Steven Spielberg's 1975 blockbuster movie was actually based on a book by the same name, published the previous year by Peter Benchley. Both the book and movie tell the fictional story of a massive great white shark terrorizing a quiet seaside resort town in the U.S. Author Peter Benchley had a lifelong fascination with sharks and said he came up with the concept for Jaws after reading about a great white shark that had been caught by fisherman Frank Mundus in 1964. In the introduction to his book, Benchley writes, "In 1964, I read an item in the newspaper about a fisherman who harpooned a 4,500-pound great white shark off Long Island. I remember thinking at the time, Lord, what would happen if one of those monsters came into a resort community and wouldn't go away? I tucked the item into my wallet, and for the time being forgot about it." While Benchley has stated that the 1916 New Jersey shark attacks didn't serve as inspiration for his novel, though he did mention them in the novel, the parallels are hard to ignore, and many respected news outlets often claim that the 1916 shark attacks were the main inspiration for the movie. It's believed that this misinformation originated from a September 2001 New York Times article about the fear of sharks, when they incorrectly cited the 1916 incidents as the movie's inspiration. A correction was published on September 8, 2001, after Benchley clarified that it was untrue. But still, most news outlets continue to circulate this same misinformation. There are actually a couple explanations for this. For one thing, the New Jersey shark attacks are mentioned in the movie and the book. In the movie, Roy Schneider's character, Police Chief Brody, while urging the mayor to close the beaches, states, "And there's no limit to what he's gonna do. I mean, we've already had 3 incidents, 2 people killed inside of a week, and it's gonna happen again. It happened before. The Jersey Beach, 1916. 5 people chewed up on the surf." Secondly, we have the similarities between what happens in the story and what happened in New Jersey in 1916. Like the movie, the first 2 Jersey Shore victims were killed within a week's time. Then, the Jersey Shore shark killed 2 more people in Matawan Creek, an estuary that connects into Raritan Bay. In the movie, the shark also swims into an estuary and kills a man. The short time span of the attacks, and the public's response of not taking the danger seriously, quickly changing to a growing panic, are also similar between fact and fiction. In New Jersey, armed motorboats patrolled the beaches, and shark hunting parties with rifles searched for the man-eating shark. They even attempted to blow up the shark with dynamite, though that proved unsuccessful. In the movie, an armed hunting party sets out to kill the man-eating shark. They use a rifle shot to a pressurized scuba tank shoved into the shark's mouth as a means of blowing up the shark. But I mean, the guy seemed pretty adamant about all of that being a coincidence, and he wrote it, so I guess he probably should know where it came from. But yet, Benchley also denied any similarities between the Jaws character Quint and the man who did, at least partially by his own admission, inspire the book, Frank Mundus. That, to me, is even more questionable as merely a coincidence, and it's widely thought that Benchley mainly denied the similarities for legal reasons. Frank Mundus, a shark hunter who became more of a shark conservationist later in life, set a record when he caught a 4,500-pound great white shark in 1964, the one that inspired Benchley to think about man-eating sharks in resort towns. According to Mundus, he repeatedly took Benchley out to sea with him after that. Mundus told the New York Times that Benchley was impressed with his method of harpooning enormous sharks with lines attached to barrels to track them as they swam to exhaustion. A similar scene is in the Jaws movie. Mundus said, "If he just would have thanked me, my business would have increased. Everything he wrote was true, except I didn't get eaten by the big shark. I dragged him in." Mundus claimed he'd told every detail of his record-breaking 1964 catch to Peter Benchley, and recognized a lot of those details in the movie. He said he even had similar personality traits to the Quint character, though he did become more easygoing later in life. He said, "I no longer drink 2 bottles of booze, bourbon, a day. That tended to bend my attitude." On his website, Mundus also stated, "Quint knew how to handle people the same way I did. He also used similar shark fishing techniques based on my methods. The only difference was that I used handheld harpoons. After field testing harpoon guns and discovering that they didn't work, that the dart would pull out after hitting the fish." Jerry Mallow, who was on the boat with Mundus on the day of the 1964 catch, said, "I think a lot of what's in Jaws he could have only known from Frank Mundus, because there are parts in Jaws that come exactly off that day on the boat." Mundus didn't receive any profit from the Jaws book or movie, but he was glad to see that actor Roy Schneider publicly acknowledged in a TV interview that Mundus was the real Quint. Mundus later set another record in 1986 when he caught a 3,437-pound great white shark with a rod and reel instead of a harpoon. He sounds pretty Quinty to me. Also, fun fact, Peter Benchley actually had a cameo in the Jaws movie. He played a TV reporter on the beach on the 4th of July. As I mentioned before, Jaws really changed the way many people looked at sharks, and not just as a new phobia or a fun jump scare in a movie. In a 1984 interview, Peter Benchley said, "The movie changed everything. It put the fear into people in a tangible way, and there was an immediate reaction which I was very upset about. People regarded the killing of a shark as a great macho triumph, and Valerie and Ron Taylor, the great Australian cinematographers and divers, called me and said, 'You don't understand what's going on down here. People are going out on these slaughter trips to prove some sort of macho nonsense about themselves. And sharks are being killed left and right, and we're worried there may actually be an endangerment to some of the species.' That was unfortunate." But along with the bad effects of the Jaws-inspired shark craze came a shocking amount of good. The movie brought a lot of attention to sharks, both bad and good. When Jaws came out, there was very little research being done on sharks, other than ways to repel them. Now, many researchers say they became interested in sharks because they watched and read Jaws. In the wake of Jaws mania, people became far more curious to learn about these incredible fish. That's led to amazing field studies and conservation efforts, the identifications of dozens of previously unknown shark species, and changing attitudes toward sharks, mostly for the positive. That change even affected Jaws author Peter Benchley, perhaps more than anybody else. For the later part of his career, Benchley became a shark conservation activist, after seeing firsthand the horrible things humans had been doing to these fascinating creatures. Financing a shark conservation movement with the money he made from Jaws, Benchley committed his life to that movement up until his death in 2006. In 1995, Benchley wrote, "The shark in an updated version could not be the villain." He added that if he were to do it all over again, the shark would have to be written as the victim, for worldwide sharks are much more oppressed than the oppressors. Benchley also had a lot of disagreements with Steven Spielberg during the making of the movie, and I read an interview with Benchley's wife, Wendy, that seemed to blame Spielberg for making the movie sharks so terrifying. I'm torn on this because I want horror movie sharks to be terrifying, but I wish people were smart enough to not go out and hurt sharks just because they're terrified of them, though in reality most sharks are actually killed for just their fins, for making soup. The truth about great white sharks is that they do attack humans on occasion, but they're more likely to bite once and leave than to relentlessly attack. Peter Benchley described great whites as the largest carnivorous fish with the astonishing capacity to assess in a microsecond of the first bite the caloric value of potential prey. Human beings are too bony to usually bother with, so they often depart after the first bite. I don't know what came over the Jersey Shore's man-eating shark or sharks in the summer of 1916, but it really was out of the norm. But if you ever do find yourself in too close proximity with an unfriendly shark, experts say this is the best advice. Swimming in a group and staying close to shore are usually helpful in avoiding a shark attack. Don't wear bright clothing or anything shiny in the water. It probably goes without saying, but also avoid bleeding profusely in the water. Sharks typically attempt to circle behind you if they're going to bite you, so they'll feel less comfortable doing that if you make eye contact. Keep calm and slowly back away. Sudden movements and splashing could attract the shark toward you. If it's too late for any of those options, fight back. Focus your attacks on the shark's eyes and gills. Those areas seem to be the most sensitive. Sharks kill an average of about 6 to 8 people per year worldwide. On the flip side, people kill an average of about 100 million sharks per year. Taking those numbers into consideration, I'm not sure we can say any shark attack is truly unprovoked. I'll leave you with a list of things I've come across while researching for this video that are far more likely to kill you than a shark. You'll probably either find this comforting or horrifying. Jellyfish, wasps, lightning strikes, cattle, electrocution by Christmas lights, vending machines, deer, beds, falling coconuts, hot dogs, mosquitoes, roller coasters, dogs, hippos, airplanes, bathtubs, volcanoes, hot tap water, stoplight intersections, high school or college football, champagne corks, tripping, lunch, raw meat, wind, bees, horses, the cold, ladders, ants, icicles, and being left-handed. That's all I have for you today. I hope you've enjoyed this story and will come back for more. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, and bring your friends, family, COVID pod, cult members, invisible friends, or enemies. And if you have any interesting shark facts to share, leave them in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching.